The Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians is pleased to present this audio-video replay. Please remember to like our videos and subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive notifications of future content.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians today for our first 2026 National Accessibility Week virtual event. My name is Diana Brent, and I am AEBC's National Secretary. I live in Alberta, but AEBC is a national advocacy organization of primarily blind, deafblind, and partially sighted members who are located in all parts of Canada. I would like to begin with this land acknowledgement. The members of the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians acknowledge that these lands on which we live, work, and gather, including the digital infrastructure of our work, are on the unceded homelands and territories of Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples in Canada from coast to coast to coast. We acknowledge our duty to walk with and alongside reconciliation and decolonization efforts. Before I introduce today's guest speaker, I would briefly like to outline some housekeeping protocols. Today's session is being recorded for our YouTube and audio channels for those who are unable to attend virtually. Please remain muted throughout the session unless you are called upon to speak. After the presentation, if you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand. We will call on you and give you an opportunity to unmute and ask your question. Once you have done so, please mute yourself again to give our speaker the opportunity to respond. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, please note the following Zoom keyboard commands for your reference. To mute and unmute on a PC, press Alt-A. On a Mac, Command Shift+A. On a smartphone, locate the Mute/Unmute button on the main screen of your Zoom app. On a landline, it is *6. To raise or lower your hand, on a PC, Alt-Y. On a Mac, Option-Y. On a smartphone, locate the raised hand button, and I checked and it is under the More screen today, and that's where you'll find it on your smartphone, and on a landline, it is *9. Now I am both honored and proud to have the privilege of introducing and welcoming today's guest speaker, Marie Renaud, who has been the NDP MLA for the constituency of St. Albert in Alberta since 2015, having been re-elected in both 2019 and 2023. Prior to serving with the Legislative Assembly, Ms. Renaud worked for almost 15 years as an executive director of Lusica Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provides residential and day supports to adults with developmental disabilities. Previous to this, she spent 2 years at the Women's Economic and Business Solutions Society and 7 years as an instructor at MacEwan University. In the spring of this year, MLA Renaud introduced Bill 206, the Accessible Alberta Act. While the UCP government has refused to pass the bill, Alberta's NDP has committed to adopting accessibility legislation when it forms government. This afternoon, Ms. Renaud will share her perspectives on crafting the act and trying to get it passed in the Alberta legislature. Now, please join me in welcoming our speaker, Ms. Renaud.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for having me today. And before I begin, I'm just going to excuse, I have two furry friends with me today. I'm doing this from home, so you have to excuse if you hear some meowing or, shadows past the camera, that's them. Anyway, so yes, I'm an MLA for St. Albert, and I don't know if people know, but most of the bills that get passed in the Alberta legislature, almost all of them are government bills. So rarely does a private member, I'm somebody called a private member, rarely does a private member get to introduce a bill. It's actually done by lottery. And so you can imagine over the last 11 years that I've been an MLA, I haven't really won the lottery and got a number close enough to the beginning to be able to table legislation, but I was this time. So I pulled a number that was low enough to be able to have a piece of legislation come to the floor of the legislature. And of course, I knew that that needed to be accessibility legislation. You may not know that Alberta and Prince Edward Island are really the only jurisdictions left without some kind of framework for accessibility. And we thought it was high time that that happened. Now, what sort of provoked this work or really emphasized the need for it is actually the UCP, that's the governing party, the UCP government. Their hand-picked and appointed disability advocate actually also called for this legislation in a report. So in 2023, the advocate and his office hired a company called Happy Cities to go out and talk to people with disabilities right around Alberta to find out what were the barriers in different areas for people with disabilities. They did that work. The report came back and said, yes, there is a real benefit to society, obviously, and to our economy to pass this kind of legislation, gave all kinds of information, was really made a great case for the need for this legislation. So naturally, the government of the day chose to sit on it and not share the report. Unfortunately, the Disability Advocate's Office is not an independent office. It's actually installed in the ministry. So there's not a lot of independence from that office. So Albertans aren't given access to the information that they're actually paying for. So anyway, an outside group was able to file a Freedom of Information request to get the report, and then they subsequently shared it with Albertans. And the report was quite well done. We tabled it in the legislature and then continued to push this government to follow their own advice, which was to pass the legislation. Now, the work that we did to consult on the legislation was really, we looked around at the provinces, what other provinces had, what was working, what wasn't working, understanding that a private member bill has some limitations because of the rules of the Alberta legislature, so we had to work with that. And we consulted with people with disabilities for the better part of a year. We consulted in person, online, town halls. We did as much as we could in keeping, understanding the boundaries of what we had to work with. We drafted legislation, and then we continued to send it back to the community to hear their thoughts. We did that 2 or 3 times and then finally had a draft. We tabled it in the legislature. We were able to debate it. Naturally, the government, I don't even think they read the legislation because their reasons for not supporting it were wrong. Had they read the legislation, they would have understood that. But I don't think that they were planning to pass this legislation at all. I think they weren't, it was not a priority for them. So naturally they killed it. We suspected they probably would. But the great news for us is that should the New Democrats in Alberta form government in the next election, then we've made a commitment that we will pass a better Accessible Alberta Act. So we won't have sort of the parameters that were given with private member legislation. So we know that we need it. In the 7 years, going on 8 years, that this government has been in power, disability supports in Alberta have taken a beating. We're about to take another one July 1st when they dismantle a long-standing income support program for people with severe disabilities. So, we were really hoping that passing accessibility legislation would actually assist in the job creation. That's what this government is using as sort of motivation to cut benefits for people with disabilities is the motivation to work. But we thought, accessibility legislation would actually complement that work, but yeah, not so. So that's in a nutshell. That was our journey that took about a year and a half. And then they were able to kill it in just a couple of weeks. But again, we're working very hard to form government the next election, and our plan is very much to pass accessibility legislation, meaningful legislation with consequences and real targets and real independence so that we can report directly to Albertans about the investments and the work that we're doing. So, yeah, that's really all I had on that, and I'm happy to take any questions or respond to any comments. I'm not sure if you want me to moderate the questions or yes. Okay. I think Richard Marion has a question.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. And I was kind of thinking that I was actually kind of shocked when I read the notes for this when it was promoted that Alberta was one of the few last two jurisdictions not to have any sort of broad accessibility framework, not even not even something like the window dressing that the Liberal
Yeah.
Party had in BC had put forward in 2014 for what would have been an accessible British Columbia by 2024, because it was just basically a white paper framework with no actual legislation as well too. So I was kind of surprised that I know in BC where the provincial government just announced that because we're already 3 years into the actual implementation of our legislation, because it was put into force in 2022 with the provincial advisory committee, and then the two standards committees that started their work in 2023, which I was on one of the standards committees as well too. But the what isn't happening here, and I would caution is it things appear to are definitely happening, but they're very slow. But the provincial government had just announced this week that they will begin the process of the mandatory review of the accessibility legislation already too as well. So, but yet we don't have any public sort of word from the minister yet what the schedule is for implementing the two existing standards that have been completed now as well too. So, which I can't get into because they're not public yet. Um, so yeah, I just caution that when you work on this, that in some ways time is of the essence, especially as the current Alberta government continues its work to dismantle disability supports instead of actually enhancing them, like doing things like an annual earnings exemption for people with disabilities, so they can work without risk of losing their benefits as well too, as well. Um, there was a time that Alberta was seen as a province that actually was progressive, even with its ongoing decades of conservative governments on disability things, because it was at one time one of the only four provinces that had sort of comprehensive adaptive equipment funding programs as well too. So it's disappointing to see, along with other things that are coming out of that province.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, you're quite right. It was a progressive conservative government, actually, the 80s, 90s, and even the 2000s that was really responsible for a lot of the really progressive disability supports. And, subsequent versions of conservatism have dismantled it, which is unfortunate because I think you're quite right that Alberta really was a leader in that area at one time. And I just want to comment on British Columbia's legislation is I think you can have the best legislation in the world, and we've seen that. If you don't have a government committed to actually moving things forward and doing the work and being there all the time and being accountable, then, we're not going to progress. And so I understand that being in opposition for quite some time, I understand that, passing legislation is one thing, but really doing the work and, the work of the regulations and all of that change really requires, concerted effort. So I'm happy that we're going into this knowing that it's not just about passing a bill, but it's a lot more work than that.
Well, and I also noticed, because I have spent some time in the States, and they passed legislation much earlier than we did, but there is so many loopholes in that legislation in the sense of, um, in our community where I go in Arizona, they have a building that they managed just to make it small enough that couldn't have an elevator put in, or didn't have to. It could easily, but they didn't because they knew they didn't have to. And I know of hotels where they have closed swimming pools rather than put accessible lifts in for people. And so, yeah, you're right that really we there's more to it. There has to be a will. There can't just be the law.
Yeah, you're quite right. Mhm. Any other questions?
Yes, we have a quiet group today. Um, but I
Doesn't have to be about the accessibility legislation. If you have a burning question about something else, I'm good.
well,
Yeah, let me give you an example. Do you know, here in Alberta, we did, well, I already mentioned that we didn't have any accessibility legislation. And in fact, the government, the minister doesn't even understand what it is. He actually thinks it's building codes and safety codes. And so he'll regularly say, yeah, no, you need to ask the Minister of Municipal Affairs. And we'll explain, no, it's more than, building codes and safety standards. And so there's really a basic lack of awareness. But when MLAs are elected here in Alberta, we're all tasked with, finding an office in our constituency and hiring staff, but we're never told that there's any requirement whatsoever that our offices are accessible to all of our constituents. And so we've had MLAs open offices on the second floor with no lift. And so that's just one example of, how bad it can be here in Alberta.
there are bright spots in Alberta. I just got a note this morning from a gentleman, and last civic election, I was asked to provide Braille ballots for the election. And it was huge, actually. But I was very pleased to be able to do it. And they have asked me again, because of by-elections that may be happening in the fall, whether I would take it on. And that does give me hope that there are some people in the government and in that understand some of it. And Braille isn't everything. I admit that.
Yeah.
I love it, but it's one piece of the bigger puzzle.
Yes, it truly is. And, and most people in government wouldn't understand what the barriers are that people encounter because that's not how they live their lives. And so, which is why it was so important to have a framework that includes all of the groups that need to be at the table to talk about what are the barriers that need to be addressed because, we've created a lot of them. So it's going to take us some time to dismantle them.
Exactly.
Oh, there's a question from Kathy.
Kathy.
Okay. Yes. I think I'm unmuted now, am I?
You are, yeah.
Okay. This may be a dumb question, I hope not, but does accessibility include websites and apps as well as buildings and other things like that? Is that considered as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kathy. And I neglected to mention, sort of explain the content of the bill. So the bill is about obviously identifying, removing, and preventing barriers in all areas. So we listed the areas. So that would be IT and communication, transportation, employment, education, procurement. What were some of the areas? All the delivery and design of programming. So we tried to capture everything. Obviously, all of the bodies that are like the agencies, boards, and commissions of government would also be required to follow the legislation. So we're trying to capture everything, knowing that we'll probably miss some things.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions that people can think of, or things that we can ask? Chantel, go ahead.
Just referring to the clawback of the recently released Canada Disability Benefit,
Yeah.
I wonder how much. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if they chose to do that, it kind of shows you how much they don't really respect the things that are related to disability barriers and things like that.
Yeah.
Because I believe Alberta is the only province that chose
Yeah.
to do this.
Mhm. You're right, Chantel, you're absolutely right. Alberta is shamefully the only province that is, I call it stealing the money away from people. This is not enough, like I think we can all agree, but that money was meant to somewhat cushion disability poverty that we're all aware of. Clearly, the Alberta government doesn't seem to be aware, but what they've done is not only reduce AISH by whatever amount you got for the Canada Disability Benefit, they're also dismantling AISH. So if they believe that you have the ability to work, they're moving you to another program and reducing your income another $200. But saying, you can work, it'll be great, when people already had the ability to do that on AISH. So it's been sort of one cut after another. People are really frightened, just really frightened about the unknown because they don't know, what's next. So yeah, it's not good in Alberta right now.
Do you have any, if I may, I don't know if there's any other hands, but
No, go ahead.
what do you think is going to happen to those people? I mean, there perhaps are people who could try
Mhm.
working. They may have been afraid in the past, or, what's going to happen to my income, so on and so forth. But for those who really can't, have you heard of any other programs that will take its place or at least compensate a little? What are
Yeah,
those
I mean,
people
what they're
going to
doing
do?
is dumping about a bunch of money, about $60 million into career and employment programs that are, marginally successful at the best of times
Yeah.
during a recession, when we already know it's difficult to find work, particularly work that is able to accommodate a disability that was previously labeled as severe. So people that were previously assessed as severely disabled on AISH already had the ability to work. They could earn up to almost $1,100 a month without having AISH clawed back. So that meant, maybe they worked for 1 month of the year, or a couple months of the year when they could, or sporadically. It allowed people to lift themselves out of poverty a little bit. What is happening now is they've created a new program. Anyone that could work, they've moved over to this new program, or anyone they suspect could work, they've decided could work, then they've lowered their income amount and said, go work, without actually doing the work to open successful pathways to employment, other than, throwing money at marginally successful programs. So it's very dangerous. We're already worried. Food insecurity has already sort of gone through the roof. Homelessness has doubled in some of our big cities. We know that this is only going to get worse when you push people further into poverty, which is why we're so alarmed, and we've been trying to, get people's attention about this.
And if they really paid attention, there are many, many uh, of us who have experienced disabilities who are very well educated and still
Yep.
can't find work. Can you imagine
Yeah.
when you don't have the correct supports in place? Yeah, thank you. I
Yeah,
just
for
thought we
sure.
might discuss that a little bit.
And I
Right.
always I go
Yeah.
back to an example of a fellow who he's a lawyer actually, and he's got cerebral palsy, wheelchair user, and just can't find work. I mean, this is an educated man too, would love to be a practicing lawyer, can't find the work that he needs. Clearly, he needs accommodations. And so, you end up on AISH. But yet, this is someone who will be deemed employable, so his income will be cut. He'll be moved to this new program, and the government is saying it's for your own good, when really what we need to do is address the barriers that continue to exist for people with disabilities to become employed. So our goal obviously is to replace this government. I think we have some really good and some really bold ideas around disability supports. So yeah, that's what we're working towards.
I have a question.
Yeah, hang
Sure.
on, Sue. We have three, so I'm just going to prepare people. We have Sue, you're next, and then Louise. And Kathy, I don't know if yours is a legacy hand still up from before, or if you want to ask a question, but we'll start with Sue.
Yes, I tuned in a bit late. Well, anyways, about elevators and bank machines that have smooth screens, especially in medical buildings. There might be an elevator somewhere that doesn't have braille numbers or buttons you can count. It's just under a smooth screen. Is anything being done about that?
So, well, I mean, they killed the legislation, so short answer is no. But long answer is, if the NDP form government and we pass this legislation, certainly um, building all of the things in a building, including lifts and including the barriers, we would identify barriers, obviously, to people who are blind or visually impaired, and that would be part of it. Now, I can't tell you what the accommodate or what the standard would look like, but I'm certain that would be addressed.
Thank you.
Yeah. Louise, you're
Okay.
next.
Okay. Hi. Thank you for coming this afternoon. I really appreciate it. And I know that, this is not going to be an answer you can give right now, but I want you to really, when you're putting in this legislation, but it's not just legislation now that needed. It's now getting Alberta into a different position. And it's one is income for people with disabilities, and as you look across the different provinces, taking some of the good and bad of each province and putting it in as you move forward, if you guys get elected, to help people with income.
Yeah, yeah.
BC's got a good program where, and you made a comment, sometimes people can't work. And this is what made me think about it. Maybe they only can work short times and maybe, make more this month because of this, but next month they can't. So doing as BC does is having the system where, and I mean, and I don't know if there's a better one than BC, so I can't say yes or no to that, but where you have a level where you can make up to within the 12-month calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And helping the people that way better,
Yeah.
that just bringing that to your table to make you aware that looking at not just what income the people are going to get, but how they can earn it and put it into their pockets.
You're quite right, Louise. And actually, AISH, the Assured Income for Severely Handicapped, is what it's called. We all hate the name, but that's what it's called.
Yeah.
So AISH, already, if you were on AISH, you received $19.41 a month. That's your income. That's what you get. Plus, at any time, any month, you could earn up to $1,100 without having AISH cut at all. So that already existed. Now, what this government has done has blown that up. Now, if you're on AISH, you can't do that. You have to go to ADAPT, which is a new program with less money, and you can earn less money before they cut you back. So all they've done is reduce people's income, reduce their earning power, and push people further into poverty. So I agree with you, Louise, that a program like AISH, like it was, is far superior to what they're suggesting now.
And it's even more powerful is just saying that you can make, okay, let's just use BC. Let's just say 16,000 within a 12-month span from January to the end of December. Would that the person then, they like to work in the summertime, they can work and maybe $5,000 and not be cut that $5,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Take
there's
seasonal work into it for sure.
Yeah.
Because working for people with disabilities, and every disability is different.
Yep.
So, and that's why I was just bringing that as as you're looking forward, and I hope you get elected. And I hope the NDP gets in.
Thank you, Louise. Me too.
We have two more hands, Penny and Linda, and Penny's hand was up first. So Penny, go ahead.
I think about the labor shortage that every province is going through. You know, it makes even less sense for this action to be taken when there's a labor shortage, and disabled people could add to relieving some of the labor shortage that is happening. Can that not be used as an argument? Have you heard anything at all about that being used in the House for discussions, but before they made this ridiculous move?
Yeah, so we did actually make that argument. And actually, Treasury Board and Finance, which is the ministry in Alberta responsible for all the money, they actually made an economic case for passing accessibility legislation. So they literally talked about the value of workers, why we need to pass the legislation so we can engage this huge workforce that has really been left out of the workplace because of barriers. So they made a really great financial case for it. And it was like this government's own Treasury Department and this government's own disability advocates saying, yeah, this is a really good idea. Now, government said they just killed it. They just said, no, we're not interested. We want people with disabilities to work, but we're not interested in removing barriers. So, I mean, it doesn't make much sense to me either.
Linda, would you like to unmute? Yeah.
Yeah, I have done.
Yeah.
I may be opening a can of worms, but here we go. What do you see as we all hear about the referendum that's pending in Alberta and the push for independence in some sectors, I'm sure not in yours, but how do you see that may well affect all of this as well? I mean, it's scary. It's scary.
It's very scary. It's very scary. And I think, what gives me, I'm very worried. I mean, I watched what happened with Brexit. My son actually lives in the UK. And, I'm very worried. I'm from Quebec originally. My family left around the time that things were getting bad. We saw the pressures of, the possible split, what it does to families and friends. I mean, I saw that firsthand. So I'm very worried. The Alberta New Democrats are very worried, and we are going to fight very hard to defeat this. There are other 9 questions are dog whistles. It's a huge waste of money. It's like between $50 and $80 million for a referendum to call a referendum, which is what nobody wanted. Happily, the polls continue to show that the majority of Albertans are uninterested in anything to do with separation, but we will be fighting very hard to just get this behind us. We're Canadian first. We're on Team Alberta, Team Canada, and we are not separatist in any way, shape, or form.
Good to hear.
Yeah. Penny, your hand is still up, which is fine. Did you have another question? Okay. Guess not. Anyone else have a question? Oh, Louise, your hand's still up too. Did you have another question?
Even Riengold had left the meeting.
No, I forgot to lower it. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. No problem.
Okay, well, it was lovely to be here today. And honestly, if I can ever answer any other questions or another topic you'd like to chat about, I'm happy to chat anytime.
Wow, thank you. And also, if there's anything that our organization can do to help you, we would be very happy to do that.
Well, when we get ready to pass it, we'll be reaching out to everybody. So absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're off somewhere, I think, later this week.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming. And I also want to thank everyone else who's come today. And before you all disappear, I would like to remind you of some of the other National Accessibility Weeks events that are happening this week. You'll notice in your emails or on social media that we have several more postings throughout the week online. We've put an accessibility survey up. We will be posting several special video clips from last year's Ask Me Anything panel. So take a look at those. They're good informational bits. And our next virtual event is in 2 days' time on Wednesday at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern. And we're highlighting two authors, Hannah Laura Levitt and David Lepofsky, who've written books. And at the same time on Thursday, we have a second writers event featuring one of our members, Penny Leclerc, who's here today, who has written a book jointly with her sadly late husband, Paul Bennett. And they've written a book, Life with Jefferson, and we've also working with her, complimenting her is another author, Lynn Jensen, who's written a book about travel tips for members of our community. So with that, I'm looking forward to seeing everyone at these events, and thank you again, Marie, for joining us today. It was a great presentation. And thank you all for coming. Goodbye until next time.
Thank you for checking out our content. To learn more about the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, please visit www.blindcanadians.ca. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe.